Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you again. This is the final session or second final, because we do have a session on ARC launches to close the conference today. If I'm clicking away, that's because I'm letting people in from the waiting room, so just bear with me, please. I will be recording the session. I think it is being recorded already at the moment. So my name is Anita Dewi. I'm one of the lecturer in the Information Studies in the School of Information and Communication Studies here at CSU. And I will be chairing the session today. But before I start, I would like to begin by acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Kundungara, and Biripai peoples of Australia, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which Charles Sturt's campuses are located, and pay respect to their elders, both past and present. I know you're joining from different locations, different places, so feel free to put in the chat of where you're joining from, which country you're joining from. All right, so this session is about the public library workforce, and we have three awesome speakers joining me, three awesome panelists joining me today. We're going to do it slightly different than the previous sessions, where this is formatted in a more of a question and answer. So the three panelists will be responding to a few questions, and we open up questions from the audience as well. So if you do have questions related to the public library workforce, to the three panelists, please do put them in the chat as well. Now I can see that Mary is already here and Jennifer is here as well. We do have one more person. Nicole, are you here in the Zoom room? Not yet, perhaps. That's all right. So we'll start with Mary and Jennifer, the dynamic duo, I guess. Jennifer is joining us from New Zealand, and Mary is here in Australia, in Melbourne. I'd like to just introduce both of you first before we move on to the actual topic. So Jennifer Campbell-Meier. Dr. Jennifer Campbell-Meier joined the School of Information Management in 2014, and as you can see, Wellington there, Victoria University of Wellington. Jennifer holds a Master of Library Science degree from Indiana University and a PhD in Communication and Information Sciences from the University of Hawaii. Jennifer has taught classes in information services, project management, and technology at the University of Hawaii, the University of British Columbia, and the University of Alabama. You've been everywhere, Jennifer. She teaches both the information studies and information systems programs, and Jennifer draws on her experiences as an academic and solo librarian. How interesting. And also discusses the role of theory and practice in information organizations. So Jennifer's research area is, there are three primary areas: the digital inclusion, information behavior, and LIS professional development. Hence, we invite Jennifer to be here today and share her views with us. Her research is unified by her commitment to develop LIS professionals capable of engaging with communities and instilling lifelong information literacy practices to support critical evaluation of information. Thank you for being here, Jennifer. And our second speaker, second panelist is Mary, my good old friend, and also, you know, someone that I look up to, of course, Associate Professor Mary Carroll. Her research draws on a multidisciplinary background and is focused on the intersection of libraries, books, and learning in both the contemporary and historical context, crossing sectors and historical eras, her research examines the role that information and information agencies play in addressing equity, promoting social inclusion, and influencing broader social issues. She has also researched extensively in the area of education for the information professions, both in Australia and internationally, from the 1930s onward, examining factors which have shaped the development and constructs of contemporary LIS education. Nice to see you again, Mary, and thanks again for being here. I think this is the time I'm still checking if Nicole is here. Simon, would you let me know if you see Nicole in the room?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But I think without further ado, we better start. And Jennifer and Mary, if I can ask you to go unmute so they can have the conversation now.
Sorry to interrupt. We've just had an update. Nicole's on her way. She'll be with us very soon.
Excellent, excellent. That's great. Okay, well, all right. Let's start with the first questions for Jennifer and Mary. And Nicole, and she's joined us shortly, hopefully. I'm leaving it open, either Mary or Jennifer, who wants to jump in first. What would you say is the most exciting, interesting, significant research-related work that you have done on public libraries?
Compelling silence. Jennifer, do you want to go first?
Hi, Nicole. Oh, thank you, Nicole.
Hello.
Yeah.
I can. I will. Tēnā koutou katoa, kua hui hui mai nei e mihi ana ki ngā mano whenua. Ko Jennifer Campbell-Meier toku ingoa no Te Wanganui a Tara aho. E mahi ana o he pukena matua ki te harenga waka. Greetings, everyone. I'd just like to acknowledge the Indigenous people of this land, so your land as well. Jennifer Campbell-Meier, once again from Victoria University of Wellington. I think the one thing that I would like to talk about, I thought long and hard about this because I've worked on research that does impact librarians in different ways. So I've been on research projects that have looked at mentoring and professional development, and then have also looked at digital inclusion efforts as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the digital inclusion efforts because the efforts that we looked at were efforts driven by professional librarians. And so it's work that was funded by a grant through Internet NZ in collaboration with the Digital Inclusion Alliance Aotearoa. And what's fantastic about this grant that I worked on with Anne and Alan and Alfred and Laura and Spencer, we spent a lot of time asking people not just about the services that they used through libraries and other organizations throughout New Zealand, but they told us about what librarians did to help them engage and participate in the community. So what we did is we first looked at how older adults were represented in digital inclusion. And it does overlook people's lived experiences. People aren't given the credit for being technologically able, and they're often left out of a lot of learning. And this is one of those areas where public libraries can lead because you already engage with older adults daily. And so building on these strengths, it's an opportunity to foster meaningful digital participation. So this research looked at the experience more deeply into the experiences of people with disabilities. And I pulled out, well, it's actually a title of a paper that we wrote too. It makes my life worthwhile. So talking about the internet and these services that the particular client had gotten from the library enabled them to interact with the greater world. And digital access isn't just about technology, it's about agency and independence and connection, and that's how it aligns with the mission of public libraries. And it's not just digital equity, it's also digital justice that we have to think about. And once again, it's that opportunity for public libraries to provide access to devices and Wi-Fi, but also offer support that empowers users. So it was an interesting project for me to look at how this digital agency and how people gain confidence and control of these spaces. They flourish when they are provided with support, and libraries are the space that most of our participants used as a place of digital empowerment. I do want to say that connected with this, but kind of an aside, is some of the work that I've done with Diane Velasquez, analyzing library website data. And I just want to bring that out because we looked at website data for public libraries across Australia, Canada, the United States, and most recently New Zealand. It's in press right now. And we found that many public library sites lack essential information. And this is specifically troublesome, or especially troublesome, for people with disabilities or people who may be using assistive technologies. So it's also kind of one of those wake-up calls about things that we can do to improve services for our users. And kind of a call to action to you all. And the one thing I do want to add in is that with professional development and support, there are opportunities to better incorporate how professional development is brought back into organizations. So often people go out for conferences and they either don't have the agency to change their own practice, or they don't have the opportunities to inform their colleagues about how to change the organizational practices. So we need to really think about that, and that ties into with mentoring and coaching, looking for clear intentional support structures. So yeah, I'd say that my research has found that professional development and professional education are kind of key to this, and it's important to keep funding things. I would like, I think that's about it. I couldn't do my research without libraries. And so I do want to point out that you are digital mentors, champions, community connectors. And I hope that the research that I do helps you advocate for the research resources and recognition that you deserve. So Nam mihi nui. Thank you all for what you do.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. I feel like you read my mind already, because I will be asking some questions related to that later on. But before we do that, Nicole, welcome. Sorry, Mary. So, Nicole, welcome. We did introduce the panelists to the audience today, but we haven't introduced you, so I will do that now.
Thank you.
I hope your travel to the Zoom meeting was not, there was no issue with technical glitch or anything like that.
Not technical, no. There was a human issue, which links into my topic anyway. So it's a beautiful segue.
Okay. So look, I don't think you need an introduction, but I'll introduce you anyway, because a lot of people either know you or know of you in this Zoom room. So Nicole Hunt is a team manager, libraries and community hubs with Townsville City Council, currently the president of Queensland Public Libraries Association, the chair of ALIA Community on Resource Description Special Interest Group, and a member of the TRO Strategic Advisory Committee. Nicole has over 36 years experience, am I correct with that, Nicole? In the library and information sector, including roles within council executive / administration, TAFE, hospital and public libraries in the public sector. Hospital and public libraries across Queensland and Victoria, along with resort and events management in the public sector. Wow. All of these roles have been underpinned by a commitment to advocating and highlighting the role of libraries have in connecting people and communities with opportunities for engagement, collaboration, innovation, and experience to enhance and enrich their lives. So I guess that's a very good explanation of why we're studying Nicole as well.
Thank you so much, Anita, and thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. Apologise, I was slightly delayed by an interaction with a customer that kind of feeds beautifully into the topic that I've selected to answer that question. Would also like to pay my respects to any traditional people joining us today, as well as pay respects to the lands, cultures and communities that those First Nations peoples are from all of the lands that we're meeting on today as well. So in response to the question, I guess one of the key things that I've been involved with, particularly in recent years, has been the evolving psychosocial impacts on library staff, particularly in light of rising social tension and service pressures. We sort of had things really kick off in Queensland with COVID and the introduction of the check-in app in Queensland. I bravely or stupidly put my hand up to be one of the first public libraries to launch the Check-in Queensland app during COVID. I'm not sure that staff in that library have ever forgiven me because we were certainly exposed to a whole range of human behaviour that we were not expecting to have ever seen in a public library. Lots of middle-aged men and elderly women throwing bags of books and spitting on staff. It was quite horrific. That sort of started, and then we started to see 2 years ago here in Queensland, the book challenges kicked off in record speed, with 2 library services being the hotspots in Logan and Brisbane, and we found that the southeast corner was really being seriously impacted by the book challenges, and as well as the issues that were obviously prevalent across society, seeing that cradle to grave age range that frequent our spaces on a daily basis, the different types of harassment, both in person and online, the derogatory comments about library staff and what we were doing in terms of provision of collection and services and programs. Without people, I think, realising just what we deal with day in, day out within our doors and in our outreach spaces as well. So seeing how frontline library workers, I guess some of us tend to develop quite dark senses of humour as coping strategies, but that incremental trauma is still highly prevalent, and we're dealing with this stuff on a daily basis. That rise in mid-level aggression across society, we're now seeing in our spaces all the time. So daily verbal abuse, repeated antagonism, the emotional strain of managing distressed and disruptive customers, those customers that are also in unique circumstances themselves, facing homelessness, displacement, mental health, drug and alcohol impacts. All of them come to our spaces as safe spaces for them to be, and we do unfortunately get to see some people that are just not in their best self at various times. This is not something isolated just to public libraries. As we started to talk more about the book challenges and the different behaviours that we were seeing in public libraries, we came to understand that these behaviours are also impacting our colleagues in the university sector, in some of the special libraries, and indeed in school libraries as well. So one of the things that we did here in Queensland, once things ramped up with book challenges, in my role as QPLA president, I brought together all of the leaders from the library services in the southeast, along with ALIA and State Library of Queensland, to have a conversation about what we were experiencing, what types of strategies we had in place, and how we could support each other. And the network really came to the fore in that space. Everyone came together. It was very cohesive. And from that first workshop, the ALIA Freedom to Read portal was actually developed, which provided a centralised location for everyone to report the different challenges and issues, sharing of documentation, sharing of information, so that staff realised that they weren't on their own, that there's someone in the next library or a library in the next state or just down the road who's potentially experiencing the same types of occupational trauma that your staff may be experiencing as well, and you've got someone to speak to. And really, the development of our professional networks and the strength that I've seen in that has been so rewarding, and it's really good to know that we have got the backing not only of our own organisations but our states and our national bodies as well to help us try to navigate through that.
Thank you, Nicole. Now we've heard two different perspectives and from different angles. I'm keen to hear your take on this question, Mary.
Your question was, what did we find exciting, interesting, or significant? And that threw me into a complete meltdown, I'm just going to say. So I resorted to ranking things that I'd done.
Well done.
I disregarded significant, and because I thought that's for the future to judge, and then I went with interesting and exciting, and that was to me personally. So I can't promise to anyone who's listening to us talk that they'll be interesting or exciting to them. And I came up with 3 things in my ranking. One which I have worked with Simon, because I'm very interested, probably not in a pragmatic way or a practice-based way. I'm really interested in conceptual things like professional education, values formation, how libraries support and subvert dominant cultures, and how we teach to those things. So it was really hard, really hard. So I did my ranking, and I worked with Simon a while ago, and I considered this my interesting one, looking at the formation or how people define their role within the public library and what they thought their role was. So that was my interesting one. And my exciting one was a really old paper, which was called The Great Classification Battle of 1910. So a historical paper, but I was really excited when I wrote it. So this is my exciting one, because I ended up at the State Library of Victoria in the Dome Reading Room at a operetta about the topic, the introduction of the Dewey classification scheme into the State Library of Victoria, and it involved spiritualism and all sorts of things. But I finally landed on one that was both interesting and exciting to me. So that's what I thought I'd talk about. And it's not practice-based, but it was really interesting. Last year, a very well-known US academic, Mary Niles Mack, died, and they were writing a festschrift on her for her to celebrate her life. And her main brief was looking at women in the profession. And they asked me whether I'd write something. I thought that'll be easy. What's that about Australia? Oh, I'm so stupid, really. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. I'd like to have Australia represented in international journals, and it doesn't always happen. So I took that on, and it turned out to be the biggest black hole that I have ever encountered. I started having a look at it and realised that probably since the 1980s, nothing much has been written about women in the profession, and nothing extensive in Australia, which was really interesting in itself. So I think ALIA briefly had and I don't know if I've got the name right, but a status of women in the professions interest group, and some work had come out of them. So then I thought, how come this has happened? Because I do think it's important, that we talk about different groups within the profession itself, about the people who work in the profession. And that was the other reason I chose this one, because it was actually about the people in the profession rather than, the practice of the profession. So I had a whole lot of questions that I started to ask myself, and some of you will think you know the answer, and some of you will know the answer, and some of you will have further questions. But the first one I wanted an answer to is, when did we become what they call a feminised profession? So I had a look at things like census data and all of that sort of stuff. And it's much more complex as this, but it ended up being women started to dominate in the profession in Australia when we started to pay women half as much as men. That was the bottom line. So that was really interesting. I mean, I sort of guessed it anyway, but and also the Marriage Bar Act, which many of you will know about or may have even experienced, where if you were married, you had to quit your job in the government service. So that was one of my questions. And then I asked myself, what were the implications of that? Of having a feminised workforce? And I think there's many positives and some negatives in terms of perceptions. So I wrote a little bit about that. And then I wanted to ask, how do stereotypes and status play into that idea of a feminised profession? Because I know that we're almost ridiculously obsessed with stereotypes and status. So I had a bit of a think about that sort of thing, and then asked myself what had happened over time in terms of the length of time that we've, equal pay, the shift in management styles. I think it's worth realising in Australia, women only started to manage many library services in the 80s. And when there was this uptake of a really strong, forceful, educated, competent group of excellent managers who started to, not that some of the men before weren't, but it was just a change in the environment. So I had a look at that, and in that fundamental shift, there seem to be some contradictions in that as well, with all those that cohort who are, I think, now just starting to leave the workforce, and I don't know whether we've acknowledged or understood their impact enough, but that's for a future researcher to look at. And a question that came out of it, which I didn't have an answer to, but I'd love to know, or I'd love people to start thinking about it. Historically, librarianship was dominated by men or had men in leadership positions for a very long time. Unlike teaching and nursing, though, we went down the association route, the professional route, and I think that has largely to do with the dominance of people who wanted it to be aligned to things like medicine and law. And I wondered, whether that has to do with being a middle-class profession, or it was to do with improving status. And so we became, while teaching and nursing, for example, had very strong union roots, we have this professional association set up. And the question I have, which would be my idea for, some people to think about, is if that had long-term implications for salary, status and conditions of library workers. Particularly noting that women were often at the forefront of battles around equal pay and conditions over time. So it brought up a whole lot of questions. I didn't have all that many answers to them, Anita, because I thought those gaps would have been filled, but in fact I found that they hadn't been. So I spent a lot of time exploring questions, but I think they have implications not just for women, but for all the diverse groups that make up the profession in terms of how we can conceptualise ourselves. So I think that's enough.
Yeah, well, that's actually good and triggering us to think about it, right? And so thank you, Mary. And again, just a reminder to the audience here, our format for this session is a Q&A, so it's quite, I hope it's more of a dialogue rather than, presentations, individual presentations, because that's also the preferred way of the panelists today. I did ask them, what do you prefer to do? How is the best to do this? So if you do have any question, do put them in the chat, and we'll try to respond to them in due course. Okay, well, there you go. I think we start warming up now with the first question. I want to move on to my next questions, I suppose. Well, one of the public library elements that have often been identified as playing a key role is, of course, the topic of this session, right? The workforce. Would you say there have been enough research done in this space? Okay, does anyone want to pick up first?
I'll go with it.
I'll go for it.
In terms of what we're experiencing in modern library workers in a public library, I would say the answer is clearly a no. Given that there is still a distinct lack of understanding around the lived experience of staff working, particularly on the front line within a public library. That's within often your own organisation as well as more broadly. I think that there are definitely some sector-specific nuanced activities that take place within public libraries. We are more than just books, and not understanding the unique pressures that staff are facing within their day-to-day role, and that vicarious trauma that they carry with them on a day-to-day basis for the most part. Our role has shifted somewhat. It has gone from a role that is not just about checking books in and out. We have seen a lot of shifts in services, and different skill sets are required now to be able to cater to that broad range of needs that members of the community have in our spaces, from learning how to use their new mobile phone, to be able to navigate computers, to be able to find the right service industry that can support the challenge that they may be experiencing at the time. And I'm not sure that there has been enough research to fully understand that and be able to embed that into ongoing education, so that the new leaders that are coming through are equipped with the right skills to move into some of these roles. I know that quite often when you are interviewing staff to work in a library, it's about books being their passion and reading and helping the community. And sometimes without terrifying people, you want to tell them what it's really like to work in a public library on a day-to-day basis. Have you done your workplace health and safety training? How skilled are you at incident management? Because they are becoming more of a skill that is required. How are your counselling skills? Is your emotional cup going to be able to contain the vast array of stories and things that are shared with you that are very personal and very real to a lot of people that are facilitating or accessing your facility? Understanding the psychosocial risks that are being faced by working in this industry, and the real, I guess, recognised element of potential burnout from working within the space and needing to perhaps step away from working, which takes away from all of the wonderful things that we do. And there are certainly amazing opportunities and services that are being delivered right across the country to community. But I think that there is potentially more work that needs to be done to understand the resilience, the experience, and the challenges, and maintaining the well-being of staff that are working in our spaces to help support the community as well.
Thanks, Nicole. I'll pick up on that a bit later as well, Nick, in the next I guess rotation. But I'd like to hear from either Mary or Jennifer now. What would you say that there have been enough research?
I will throw it in. I will say time and money. And time and money isn't just research grants for the researchers. There's not enough time for library staff to actually commit to participating in research projects. I mean, not all the time, but sometimes it's actually a real commitment, and it's very difficult with everything else everybody is doing to carve out an hour of your day just to talk to someone about your experiences, it's a big ask, and I think that we understand that. I have done some research with a student on lived experiences of librarians, and it was rough, and it was yeah, rough. And we never ended up publishing it. I think it's in an open access repository, so if it is, I'll share it with Anita and Nicole and try and get it out to people who might be interested. But other research that we have that's kind of in progress, we had participants who were working in a professional development long course, so something that was over 16 weeks, and they couldn't even complete the course because of the time and the commitments that were going on, so let alone do the research to evaluate what happened once you finished. So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, so true. Thank you, Jennifer. Mary?
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute, as always. So my answer to this, of course, was a completely, as usual, conflicted, because I think, yes, there has been a lot of research on it, but we don't use it. And we don't use it because we reinvent the wheel too much. So instead of being strategic and having a look at and I'm not saying things haven't changed, but what I have discovered, and it is partially to do with the sort of research I do, is that there's no idea that I can think of, a contemporary idea, that someone hasn't already researched at length. And so while the context and the language often changes, the focus and the reasons for it are often very similar. And so for some reason, and I'm not sure why, we don't take a long view of our profession. We don't look back at, and this comes back to a couple of things I've worked on. The one I mentioned before with Simon, which was a replication study of a 1980 study on what people saw as their role, and another one I'm working currently with Casey, Kay and Crystal on the relationships or the communication between public libraries and school libraries, particularly say in regional areas or whatever. Both of those come out of research that's been done in the past, and by looking back at what was done and found, it provides an opportunity to hear the voices again, see the research again, but also to see if anything's changed. And that to me often is, in my head, the greatest conundrum. Why haven't things progressed, or why haven't things changed? And I think it's to do with what's been mentioned by both Nicole and Jennifer, is that's time, there's money, there's all of those things. But I also wonder, once again, going back to what I was saying before in the first bit, is how much we understand about the motivations of our profession, the internal motivations. Why do people become librarians? What do they think the job is going to be like? And what do we know about the people who take on the profession? I often hear people talk about things like, oh, we don't have the skill sets, we don't have this, we don't have that. But for a long time, I was the person who did all the enrolments for our master's program, and I'd see the qualifications people were coming in. They were coming in with everything. They were coming in with, there was teaching and nursing, which is fairly commonly known. But amongst them, there were counsellors, there were dentists, there were anthropologists, there were media people, there were journalists there. So knowing a bit more about that, I think is a gap, that we don't know enough about who our people are generally and the skills they bring. And so as a result, we bring people from outside in, not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, without acknowledging that actually we may have those people in our midst, and we're not just using them, or they could be like, you know, some people don't want to go back, don't want to revisit that. That's why but we want to know why they're taking up the profession. So it's a yes and a no. I think there's lots of opportunities and research that have been done, but there's gaps in that research around our profession, because I think we like looking at our patrons and our services, but I'm not sure we like self-reflection. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. That's cool perspective. Don't go on mute yet, because I think that's a nice segue for you to to respond to my next questions. Really, on that note that you've just shared with us, Mary, what do you think are the most urgent or significant? I know you're not quite comfortable with the word significant before. Aspects that do you think are currently missing in the research-related work in public, particularly on the public library workforce, because that's the topic of this session.
Yeah. And I think I'm with both Jennifer and Nicole. They've both mentioned the lived experience, and that's exactly what I had taken a note of. But bigger than that, not just the day-to-day experience, but who are our people? Who are they? You know, how do they get to work in libraries? I could, and I'm sure nearly everybody who's listening could make probably an educated guess at how people end up in the profession or why they end up. But there's not an awful lot of work but having been done about that. And as an educator, and as for the educators in the room, knowing who those people are, you know, is there things that we can do to broaden the perspective of the profession, to broaden our own understanding, you know, for employers to know, you know, there's last year 300, I don't know, archaeologists undertook librarianship as a profession, not 300, but, you know, there'd be, I'm sure 10, you know, that sort of fine grain about who's taking on the profession. And the other thing I've always been really interested in, is the oh,
And then there's a feedback.
are we all right now? Can you hear me?
Try again, Mary.
I'm speaking now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is pathways. I'm really interested in educational pathways and the strength of the profession in terms of our, you know, library technicians who are often first in family, who often get a job at the public library, and that's how they start their career. When you talk to them, and then what are the implications for that in terms of what equity, you know, you'll often talk to them and they'll be the first in family, you know, they're new migrants or whatever it happens to be, all sorts of different reasons. And this opening of opportunity, I think it's an unacknowledged strength of the profession, that we've had this pathway for 50 years, we're the first profession to allow this pathway through the professions. But having said that, it doesn't seem to have had a huge impact on the diversity of the profession. So they're the questions I would like to answer if I wasn't retired.
Now we'll drag you back in. Jennifer and Nicole, anything to add to that? Please.
Oh, I'll go because now I've just written down what my next research project's gonna be. I'll take on. What I came up with was thinking about mid-career librarians. So I'd done some research on who gets professional development and who doesn't. And the mid-career people get left out. You know, we often throw resources at early career people or people who are joining into a leadership role. But I think this ties in with what Nicole spoke about too. That mid-career professional often faces shifting roles and burnout, and how do we get them to stay engaged and reskill? And I think that if I could fund something, it would probably be in that. The other topic would be thinking about our own professional development, especially around evaluation practices, and instilling. I think it's partially on me as an educator. I don't know what other institutions, this is my second research project that's coming out of this, is looking at how the profession, the information studies programs teach evaluation measurements. How do you measure what's going on, I guess? And I don't think that we spend enough time on that, because it's probably in a little bit in management, and a little bit here and a little bit there. And how do we create kind of a cohesive narrative around that? Or how do we create a narrative about what we do so that we can take it to another organization, to our councils, to whomever? And then I think there's something to be said too about that organizational culture and supporting informal peer learning, but also where mentoring and coaching fits in, and making sure that we actually fund ourselves. I'm saying this as a former professional, where the first thing that I cut was my professional development budget, right? Because you want to keep everything else. But is that the right cut to make? I'm not sure. I know it's bad metrics if you fly off to a conference while you're shutting the doors, but there's got to be that kind of give and take. And I think that we have maybe canceled things that we didn't have to. And then also thinking about equity and access to professional development. So thinking about how we do or support more online learning for people in rural areas, for people who might have other barriers to training. What other initiatives are out there? What can we do? So that would be.
Thanks,
Nicole?
Jennifer. Yeah, look, having worked considerably in regional areas, one of the challenges that we face is that trying to attract and retain staff, particularly when we are in housing crisis, and being able to find somewhere for them to live if they do want to relocate. We find that we're quite often engaging library staff that have no library qualification, no library background. Sometimes the cost and the thought of, particularly for someone who's coming in a mid-career position, the thought of having to do a full university degree is quite overwhelming. They have families, they have financial pressures. If your organisation isn't going to be supportive and help with professional development and education costs, that can be prohibitive to a number of people. That heavy formal learning may not be something that is conducive to all learning styles as well. With the ALIA framework, there was a lot of discussion when that was being compiled, putting together potential micro-credentials. So if you do have a qualification in another field, could there be micro-credentials that can help support you with the on-the-job learning that you're undertaking? Some people are learning a lot more being on the floor. They might come from a great customer service background, so they've got that fantastic underpinning skill. How can we then develop their library side of things, and how can we encourage more people to take up formal study? What we're seeing since COVID is how many of the more remote and online versions of university studies have been diminished in terms of the library profession. And I know I bang my head against the wall in my own organisations at a repeated basis to understand that we are a profession, and therefore our staff as professional staff should be afforded the same opportunities as the engineers and any other professional within this organisation to attend professional development activities, conferences, networking, different types of skills development, so that they can maintain relevancy. You may have staff who have worked in libraries for 20 years because it is a great place to work, who have done no type of formal skills development or upskilling in that entire time. And so as a profession, we are often not looked at in the same category as other professions within our organisation, and therefore funds are not directed to help support us develop. And honestly, the landscape that we are working in now has shifted so much that there are other skills that people need to be educated in. The work's increasingly complex now. It's emotionally demanding, layered with so many responsibilities, far beyond what we would consider traditional library skills. And we need to be able to have the right leaders undertaking this type of training so that they can then upskill and prepare our future leaders. How do we entice future library leaders to actually undertake a professional qualification, knowing that they can come into the sector and that the sector will embrace them and help support them on their future journey in an education perspective?
Quite a few comments related to that as well, Nicole, Jennifer, and Mary. You can probably see it in the chat. That actually triggers quite a lot of WH questions that can direct into the, things that we need to investigate a bit further, I guess. Because this is very related to what was brought up by the three of you just now, I'd like to read out Kay's question in the chat, and I'm hoping that the panelists can address this. Why do you think that we have such talented and experienced people working in libraries? Like what you said, Mary, before, 300, did you say anthropologists joining the, maybe not 300. And yet the general public often react with surprise when they found out a qualification is required to work as a librarian. Interesting, very good question, Kay, I have to say.
I mean, I've had experience where that exact question has been asked. What, you have to go to university to be a librarian, but isn't everyone in the library a librarian? It's like, well, no. Shall we sit down and have a conversation about the economic educational structure of libraries? And you are correct. We have a lot of people coming into our spaces that have amazing skills that are very much undervalued. And I know myself, I have sat down and looked at positions and gone, okay, I'm looking at a systems role. I want someone that's got systems skills and techniques and abilities. I can teach them the library stuff and we'll get them to do some other kind of course at a later date, because it's a specific field that I need that technical capacity. And if that's the only way I can win the argument with the executive to get that job across the line, that's what the option that I'm going to have to take. And we'll work really hard to teach them the library side of things. I shouldn't have to choose though. I should be able to say, well, fantastic, you've got this skill set, you've got this skill set. Often you'll see roles where it says, oh, well, we'll offer you the position, but you must undertake a library qualification and start that in the next 12 months. How many times is that actually followed up? And how many times are people held to account for not actually starting the course? They go, oh, but I'm working here now, and why should I have to pay all the money for just doing the stuff that I'm doing every day anyway? And I sometimes feel that that attitude does erode the significance of the profession and the hard work that many other people have put in to get a formal qualification. If there's an ability to have some kind of micro-credential that can bridge the amazing skills that you learn on the job, as well as provide some type of recognition from an educational perspective, that would be the perfect ideal.
Mary, Jennifer?
I was just wondering whether one of the things that's at play, and this, I'm sorry, I'm not very practical, but I am trying to think really hard, is that into public library, there seems to me to fall, a different, and this is a learning, sorry, I'm being incoherent now, learning, we need to know more about who wants to work in public libraries, who wants to work in academic libraries, who wants to work in other information type agencies. And we don't know enough. And that comes back to what I said before, that is it that you get people into the workforce who have no formal qualifications, they decide to do a library technician's qualification, they work for a while, and then decide to do their postgraduate degrees or undergraduate degrees, And in that case, this is a very old argument, you have someone, and please no one be offended, it's just an old argument, with nothing but library qualifications. And then you've got another cohort of people who are doing grad dips and master's degrees who've come with these other skills. So what I increasingly think is there some sort of divide that happens between public libraries and other libraries and who applies for the positions. Does it matter? And I think you've said it does. Where the location, the region, the availability of staff. So knowing more about all of that, I think is something that I've always thought of interest and valid, because I wasn't 30 anthropologists, it was like 6. But I mean, every year I did enrolments, I'd find lots of people with these really diverse skills, yet I constantly heard that we have nobody with these skills. So where are they? That's what I'd like to know. Where have they gone with those skills? So it's not a very long-winded answer, and we do need more anthropologists, I think, and archaeologists. A couple of years ago we had 3 archaeologists in a row in one intake. So I don't know. Knowing about who's I think I have a fairly unique perspective because I see who's coming in, but I don't know if anybody else has that perspective. So
I will say we're getting more more applicants with more diverse work experiences. So most recently we've had surgical nurses, lots of teachers, other nurses. So I think there's, it's those career shifts where something that's the grass is always greener type of experiences with second career people. So there are mid-career groups that they're looking into these other contexts to maybe find the meaningful work that they would like to participate in and perhaps don't recognize. We aren't getting as many students who are looking for, who like reading. That was something about 10 years ago. We did have a lot of students who always noted that in the application. We're getting much different groups here in New Zealand. So I guess that bodes a bit well. I worked in a rural library, and what kept me there in South Dakota, which is the middle of nowhere in the United States, was a library director that supported my professional development and let me try things. And yeah, it's creating that kind of organizational synergy, I guess, and it was tough. It was 72 miles, from an interstate. And so it was 5 hours from the next really major city, which would be Minneapolis. So it was quite empty, but it was a great job. And it was on the academic side. And I think that there's a little bit, probably more opportunities where people are willing to shift. It's that who's willing to move for positions as well, that might tie into some of the issues that Nicole and Mary Carroll have noted. So yeah, I'm interested now. I'm going to I would like to know these questions, the answers to these questions as well.
Oh, excellent. See, well, we've got quite a lot of comments in the chat, and I don't know if I have time to read through one by one, but one interesting one that's very personal. I came from archaeology, and I think all of us with these skills are forgotten in the workplace. Good point. I don't know what your name is. I can't tell from your username there, but yeah, it's a really great point. Look, I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes or so, which is the remaining of the time for us in this session before the ARC Discovery Project launches. Let's give it a blue sky thinking now, panelists. If you are given all the resources needed, I know, Jennifer, you mentioned budget, time, and so on and so forth, right? If you are given all the resources needed, no constraint whatsoever, what aspects of public library workforce would you, if not already, investigate/research? Come on, this is the good story. I'd like to end our session in a very, motivating thoughts and inspiring, I guess, research and investigation thoughts. Yes, Nicole.
Yeah, look, one that sort of is really front of mind for me. In March this year, we held the QPLA conference here in Townsville to over 210, I think it was, Queensland Public Library staff and vendors. And it was a focus on wellbeing resilience. And one of the things that came out of that was Jane was there. Jane Garner was one of our presenters. And it's become very apparent that based on what's occurring in the landscape of public libraries at the moment, that there is no national training course that is available that is library specific, that understands the nuanced role that we play in community, the things we are faced with on a daily basis. Speaking to a colleague recently who had gone to a training session about vicarious trauma, and when they started to provide examples, we're basically told by the trainer, that's too much, I can't help you. We don't need that. What we actually need is some type of national understanding of what our libraries in each of the sectors are facing and how someone can write a specific type of training program based on research of who's working in our library spaces, the types of things that are occurring, how we can go beyond traditional customer service in our space and just the standard information literacy to really empowering library staff, tackling the real life stuff that's occurring on the ground, providing real life strategies, techniques, procedures, documentation, policies, something that's going to embed wellbeing and psychosocial safety for our staff so that they can continue to do the fantastic work that they do in community and still be keen and interested and motivated to turn up every day and to continue to deliver. That would be my big thing. A resourced, resilient and respected library workforce begins with acknowledging the emotional intelligence, safety and human adaptability that's now essential in our profession. So how can we match that with the intelligent training and support systems?
I knew you're going to give me that long list. Let us hear from either Jennifer or Mary. I can see Jennifer is gonna unmute already. Do you want to go next?
I think I just forgot to mute myself, but that's okay. This is the question that I had the most difficulty with because there's so many things that are going on, and as you may know, they just killed the pay equity bill here in New Zealand. So there is now a 10-year moratorium on pay equity claims in New Zealand. Can't do anything. And so I think what I would like to see is more research about councils, believe it or not, why councils don't actually support libraries, but also going back to that idea of storytelling and how we share what we do, which actually goes back to the comments about why are people surprised that librarians need degrees. I think it's thinking about how we maybe we have to take ownership of our story. Maybe it's that lived experience. Well, I'll go back to the lived experience. Sorry, as I ramble. But taking ownership of the stories we tell about public libraries and identifying how what the benefits are to the local communities. And I think making sure, and it does tie to that evaluation confidence as well, making sure that we actually consider what the outcome and the impact of everything that we do is. It's very structured, but if we're starting a project, if we get it down at the very beginning and say, this is going to impact this, I'm going to have to capture evidence to prove that, and making sure that we start gathering the evidence early to tell the story, to prove our worth, our return on investment to the wider communities. And I think that's going to be key. But it's changing that narrative. And I'm wondering, years ago, there used to be a lot of research about stereotypes in librarians. And I don't think those stereotypes have changed. I think that we're still looking at some of which is funny because the stereotypes were often of quite educated women who were in the profession as well. And we're doing computer programming and we're working with, thinking of desk set and some of the other media presentations. But I think we have to go back and kind of reclaim what the profession is, what the profession does, and maybe do some marketing research for ourselves.
Interesting. Mary, come on, Mary, give us some blue sky thinking too. What do you think?
I think I've said mostly what I think needs researching. And if I had all the money in the world, what would I research is essentially what you were saying. I think we need to know ourselves better. Those key questions I talked about with my article about women, I think we've never taken a particularly industrial view of our role. I'm not saying I'm supportive necessarily one way or the other, but it is an interesting conundrum. People valorize nurses, particularly, for example, and yet much of the community work that we do is very valuable. We may not necessarily always every day save lives, but we do save lives and do all of those things. So no, that lived experience is one. And knowing our people, I guess, knowing much more about us, because what I think we do is know a lot about our institutions and organisations, and I've said this before, but not very much about us. And going to Jennifer's point about marketing, I think if a problem's been around for 100 years, then it's bigger than that. So, and I think that's what I was sort of alluding to at the very beginning. What is it that shapes the perceptions of us? I haven't got an answer to that, but a big exploration of that rather than, the stereotype stuff that was always great fun. I also like to add, Jennifer, that I think desk set should be compulsory viewing for every person in the profession. But yeah, so I've got about 1,000 ideas about what I think it could happen, but it's mostly about knowing us, not necessarily what we do, but who we are.
That goes back to us, our professional identity, isn't it, Mary?
A professional identity, but I think there's much more complex things. I mean,
Yeah.
the stereotype is, sadly, it's some part true. We're still not an equitable profession. We're not representative. Even the fact that, what is it in Australia, about 82 or 84% of the profession is female. I'm not saying that, that it necessarily, as I said at the beginning, is a bad thing, but, what is it about that dynamic? And what are the implications for that? Why don't we attract in large numbers various equity groups? Why are we not a working class profession? Are we a two middle, all of those things that are sort of, just par for the course, you know, white, what is it, 2 white, 2 female and 2 middle-aged, or 2 middle class. I can't remember which it is, but, you know, I mean, that was written 50 years ago. And I'm not saying that that's everybody here, but the perceptions and the reality are not miles apart. So equity and about ourselves. Shut up, Mary. I'll stop now.
Oh, no. Thank you. Yeah, well, you've got a lot of support or supportive comments there in the chat, and you're more than welcome to read them, panelists. In fact, Jennifer, here it is. Perhaps the recording of this needs to be sent to councils. How about that? I think that's fun and interesting. I mean, we can talk about it on and on and on, but we've come to the mark of 3:10 p.m. unfortunately, and I have to close this session and then move on to the next part of the 90 minutes with the ARC Discovery Project launches. But I would like to invite all the audience here to join me in thanking and applauding our panelists today, Dr. Jennifer Campbell-Meier of Victoria University of Wellington, Associate Professor Mary Carroll of Charles Sturt University, and of course, Nicole Hunt, the President of Queensland Public Libraries Association. Thank you so much, Jennifer, Mary, and Nicole. Looking forward to having discussion again with you sometime sooner or later. Thanks so much. I would like to now hand over the microphone to Simon for the next part of this session, please.
Thanks, Anita. So yes, just the last part of this last session, and I should add my thanks to the panel members. That was a really interesting discussion. Yeah, this last session is some good news, I think, in general, which is that in the last round of ARC, Australian Research Council grants, there were not 0, not 1, but 2 quite large scale grants awarded to projects investigating or related to public libraries. And so we're joined by Professor Philip Hyder and Professor Tina Du, who are leaders of these projects, to launch them to the public library community. So I'm going to pass straight over to Philip to introduce the role of public library services for a changing rural Australia.
Thanks, Simon. So what I have to do is put it on the right mode. So hopefully everyone can see that. So yes, so we've been very lucky this time round. So this is about the future. We had quite a bit about the past from Mary, fascinating as it was, and there are lots of really good research questions that were promoted there by the panel. Great discussion, and this is a bit of what we will be doing in terms of research going forward. So we, as Simon says, we're very lucky. Got 2 ARCs are the big ones, quite a bit of money, and usually it isn't any, and it's both public libraries in particular. So really good news for this part of the world, that we've been recognized that, they are worth researching, public libraries and their services. So the first one is the one that I'm leading here, the role of public library services for changing rural Australia. So obviously it's focused on that particular part of the world, rural Australia. And as you can see, it's a partnership, not just with the ARC, who give us the money, but in terms of the people, we've got a really great team, 3 from CSU and 2 from Griffith. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we're wanting to do. So it's a 3-year project, quite a lot will be going on, and we're just in the early days. But just to tell you a little bit about how we got to this point and why we put the application in and so forth. As you might have realized, myself and Simon, we're the ones on this particular ARC, have been looking at public library stuff, all kinds of aspects of public libraries for quite some time now, along with lots of other of our colleagues in the Libraries Research Group. And those are just a few things that we've been investigating. Really start off with COVID, as a lot of things do, and we had a whole big team of people looking at the response public libraries to COVID, and then what happens afterwards, all that kind of thing. And we've also gone on to do various other things, looked at published mission statements across Australia, looked at physical spaces with people missing their visits to the library because of COVID, and then hopefully coming back afterwards and so forth. And following on from that, looking at how to design or co-design specifically new library spaces. That's working with the community, and it's also been supported by a big ARC grant, and we're in the process of finishing that off. We've already published quite a few things in places like JALIA, the Journal of Australian Library Information Association. So you can read more about that if you like. There's a little picture of some of the co-designing that's gone on. We've been very lucky to work not only with the State Library, we've also supported it a big time, but several public libraries across New South Wales. And yeah, we're finishing that off. We're coming up with a toolkit. So as well as publications, we've got something quite concrete and practical to hopefully give the public libraries quite soon if they want to do any more co-designing of their spaces. And so in amongst that research, we touched base with a range of libraries across the whole of New South Wales and the whole of Australia, including those in more rural areas. And one of the things that we that came through when we were talking, we're doing some interviews with people in those libraries, was that it was a bit different for them. Maybe in some ways it was similar, but in some ways even more extreme in terms of coping with not much in terms of resource and so forth. And it really all depended on the librarian, but if the librarian had the energy and the creativity and so forth, lots could still get done. And so we were thinking, well, this is something that we haven't really looked at, specifically rural libraries. We've taken cross sections of libraries across the country, but we haven't really homed in, and they don't seem to have had so much of a voice in the publications about even public libraries. So we thought, how about this as another project? And we began by thinking how we could try and get a grant, basically, to do some really in-depth work. And usually what you have to do is you have to do some preliminary research. So we did a big survey of specifically public libraries and their managers across what I call rural Australia, what we are calling rural Australia. So that's not inner regional, so not places like Wagga, but a bit more remote than that, but outer regional, so smallish towns, and then remote and very remote. So really quite rural places, and using the ABS measures of remoteness, we sent a big questionnaire out to all those relevant libraries, and we got a really good response rate, about 40% returned. You might have read this report on this in JALIA, as published last year. Did this at the end of 2023, and those 100 or so public librarians who responded told us all sorts of things about what was going on, often similar to what you might expect in the metropolitan areas, but also some differences. And obviously, in some cases, it would be about resources, particular resources that just weren't there, particular kinds of workarounds that had to go on, particular issues that they had to grapple with. But also on the plus side, in these communities in particular, it sounded as though, from what the respondents were saying, is that they were particularly important because there weren't that many alternatives in a very small town. There's not too many other places to go to, even socially there aren't too many places to go to, let alone all kinds of different services. So I don't really have time to go into those details, but we were quite encouraged by our survey. There seemed to be lots to explore. We got the librarians' point of view, but we wanted to try and really drill down into the communities themselves to see what they thought was going on and what should be going on with their libraries and how they valued them, or not, as the case may be. So we wanted to actually go have a look ourselves, which is where the money comes in, because of course these places take a bit of money to get to even and do some field work in. But that was the idea, and that's what we proposed to the Australian Research Council. It takes a long time, so throughout last year we were busy filling in lots and lots of big application and doing rejoinders and things like that, but we got there in the end, and as you can see, we were successful. Lots of money relatively, and it's a 3-year project, so about 4 or 5 months in, but we've still got all the work to do. These are the official aims. So from the grant application, just seeing what's going on, what's the impact of these library services for those particular communities in rural Australia. What are the different roles? Could be community building, could be filling in a gap in digital inclusion, all kinds of things. And then hopefully a translation piece. So what, if so and so is going on, how could they do even better? So we're hoping to bring together the practitioners afterwards, as I'll mention, and try and really address that second aim. But we put the application in with the help of, as I noted before, some colleagues from Griffith. So it's Simon and me for this one, out of the Libraries Research Group, and then we've got Amber, a lecturer at Griffith. We've got a really good working relationship now with Amber. We just put it out there. She's not a library scientist, but she happens to have worked with the State Library of Queensland, and she's a digital inclusion specialist, which we thought was a particularly important piece for this particular context. And she's also a rural ethnographer, which is exactly what we need, because Simon and I are not rural. Hopefully we're going to become rural ethnographers, but we're not at the moment. So she really complemented our skill set, and we've now got 2 wonderful PhD students. So the money is going towards us being able to go out there to visit these communities, and also to support these 2 full-time PhD students to form this nice team that we've got. So we've got Lulu, who's come on board with a library science background and a public libraries background to be the CSU PhD student, and we've got Chanel, who's got a different background, again a communications background, a bit like Amber, to work with her in particular. She's doing the PhD there at Griffith. So now we've got all the team in place, we can start doing stuff. So we're divvying up the fieldwork duties. So we've got, obviously we can't cover the whole of rural Australia, but we're trying to spread ourselves across different kinds of rural situation as we can, because CSU and Griffith are in New South Wales and Queensland in particular. Specifically, we've got a few more case sites there. So we've got 3 identified. I can't tell you which ones they are for ethics reason, but believe me, they're in rural Australia. And obviously there could be kinds of places in Queensland, but we've got 3 in Queensland, a couple in New South Wales, quite different kind of localities, kind of different industries going on in those particular communities and so forth. And we've got 1 in South Australia, and we should definitely have 1 in Western Australia, given that's so rural there. So we've got 7 altogether. And as you can see, we're going to be busy doing lots of field work across about 18 months, 3 or 4 visits each time, and about 2 weeks each. So we're going to be collecting lots and lots of fieldwork data from those 7 sites. I'm trying to squeeze on, but I should really close in a moment, but it'll be classic field work. So participant observation, looking at the library, but also outside the library, conducting interviews, formal and informal, both inside and outside the library. Looking at, that's the benefit of doing it ethnographically. We're going to be looking at it holistically, talking to all kinds of people that want to talk to us about the library and its role. So we might end up with doing a few focus groups as well. Some outputs, obviously we have to promise lots of publications, scholarly outputs, but also, as I mentioned, that translation piece. converting what we've learnt into something that hopefully will feed into practice. So a national roundtable, the end of the project in a couple of years, with everyone who's interested, stakeholders. It's going to be hybrid, so online and probably in Canberra. And hopefully out of that, we can publish a white paper on, what should be happening specifically for libraries in rural Australia. And that's the project page. Hopefully I haven't taken too long, Simon.
No, we're just about okay. We can go a little bit over if we need to. Thanks a lot, Philip. And obviously I'm biased because I'm part of that project, but I'm really looking forward to this research, and I think it'll be very interesting and hopefully important for the sector. Okay, so I'll pass now to Professor Tina Du. Tina's the head of school in the School of Information and Communication Studies here at CSU. You should be able to share your screen, I think, Tina. Yep, that's great. So I'm going to pass over to Tina to talk about her project, which is Australian Public Libraries and Social Capital, an exploratory study.
Thanks very much, Simon. I'm trying to figure out whether you can see my screen properly.
We can see your screen,
but not show screen. Trying to so they're holding the screen, but not the show screen.
That's right. Yeah, we can just see.
So I need to switch these two screens. So I'll say how I can. Sorry about that. I'm trying to find how I can switch the two screen because I can see the other screen. Share or sorry, I'm not the Zoom person. Let me share again, trying to see. It's not sharing. See how it's going. Let's do this.
Tina, can you press from beginning? So when you go on slideshow,
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we've got it.
Sorry, can you see my screen now?
Yep, we've got it. Can you hear it?
Can't see you, Tina, but can see the screen.
Okay.
Oh,
What
great.
about now?
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience. As Simon and Philip introduced, I think this is a very exciting, time for the CSU library research because this is the second project we received ARC funding last year. The project commenced early this year. Now before I talk, I just talk my project. I would like to thank you very much for the panelists. Actually, I listened carefully to Nicole, Jennifer and Mary, very great insights and on both research and our education. So back to this project. This is the project we do, with this important background that currently in Australia. So these slides shows the significance and urgency why we need this project. At the time of the growing, social disconnection, Australian public libraries, which visited over, 146 million times a year, are uniquely positioned to help build trust, connection, and community engagement. So this project focusing on the social capital development and the role of public libraries in playing in that development. So the project explores how libraries foster social capital and what space, surveys and strategies make the biggest difference. So together with Professor Helen Partridge at Deakin University and the 6 public libraries partners across 4 states, including Queensland, Victoria, SA, and New South Wales, we will co-develop the evidence-based maturity model to guide and grow libraries' role as community connectors. So the key concept we do, of course, here is the social capital. It's about relationships, trust, and networks that help communities survive. From the community perspective, social capital refers to the features of social organization, such as networks, norms, and trust, which facilitate coordination and cooperation for mutual benefit. And from individual perspective, social capital refers to resources embedded in a social structure that are assessed and mobilized in purposive actions. And from institutional perspective, social capital is particularly relevant in rural and regional contexts. This refers to the collaborative networks involving public institutions and voluntary associations. We, in this project, we look at 3 dimensions of social capital. Namely bonding social capital, which refers to strong ties within homogeneous groups, such as close friends or people with shared characteristics. And the second dimension is bridging social capital, which connects people across diverse social groups, fostering generalized trust and access to broader social networks. The third dimension of social capital we'll look at is called linking social capital, which describes connections between individuals and institutions or people in the positions of authority. So that's a key concept we look at in this project. So what will this project do? As I mentioned, we commenced the project early this year. So this still in then we the early this year, and then a couple of months we spent time in all these administrative tasks, including the sign the contracts and appoint the RA and preparing ethics application, etc. So we are ready to go while in the consultation with these public libraries with our draft data collection and analysis strategy, while also waiting for the ethics approval from the university. So what will the project exactly do? This is a national study to understand how public libraries in both metropolitan and regional areas foster social capital. So we look at 3 key questions. The first one is about role. What is the role of Australian public libraries in fostering the development of social capital? And what are the mechanisms that enable or have the potential to enable the Australian public libraries to help foster or increase social capital, if at all? The third one is, how do Australia's public libraries in regional and metropolitan areas differ in the mechanisms that foster and or increase social capital? So the role, for example, how do public libraries in Australia help build stronger, more connected communities? What role do they play in encouraging people to trust one another, get involved in community activities, and engage in civic life? How do libraries contribute to the social well-being and cohesion of the community they serve? Mechanisms such as, how do public libraries in Australia foster the connections among community members? What specific programs, surveys, space interactions, and activities offered by libraries help people build networks, trust each other? And the difference, as we say, are there any differences in how libraries in these areas help people build trust, form networks, and engage with their communities? What can we learn from this difference to improve library service across different communities with varying socioeconomic demographics? The same as Philip's project, this is also the 3-year national study using a multi-case site case study approach. We would conduct field work across 6 diverse public libraries in these 4 states, covering both metropolitan and regional public libraries and their communities. So from 2025 to 2026, we will conduct data collection through multiple methods, including interviews with library staff, including management and frontline staff members, library users, non-users, and community partners, council members, etc. And also observations of everyday library activities, programs, space use, We also include questionnaires to complement those qualitative findings. We also perform these document analyses by reviewing the strategy plans, reports, and policy documents. In the last year, we will provide insights, based on these research findings to develop a maturity model. So that's basically this the methodology and specific methods we're going to apply. So the core of the maturity model, that's one of the key outcomes, would be defining progressive levels, including these awareness, emerging, developing, embedding, and leading, the multiple levels that we call progressive levels, which indicates how well a library integrates social capital development into its operations. These levels could range from the initial awareness to or basic provision to highly embedded and a strategy approach. That's about the project. So our project builds actually on the previous past Australian research. The first research started in 2000. That's conducted by UTS colleagues and State Library New South Wales. They focusing on libraries as safe, trusted space. The second project we reviewed on this topic is conducted by Hillebrand, the master thesis in 2004. It's focusing on regional SA, South Australia study. And the last study is about 8 years ago. Myself and Safira Hire, we conduct the library supporting social capital for immigrants. So this is the first national study of public libraries and social capital in over 20 years. So that shows the significance, urgency, and uniqueness of this project. So I hope I finished on time. And if you are interested in the project, I want to chat a bit more. I know our audience are from researchers, practitioners, professionals. Please feel free to contact us by scanning this QR code. That's where links to our project webpage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tina. Really great to hear about that project as well. And I guess that brings us to the end now of the first Australasian Public Library Conference. Thank you so much to all of our speakers across the 3 days. It's been fabulous hearing about all the amazing work and research that's going on in public libraries across Australia and New Zealand and beyond. And it's really struck me, the sheer variety of work that is done in public libraries and the ways in which public libraries touch and support Australian communities. So it's been an amazing showcase for all the committed and hard work that's being done in public libraries across the world. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you to all our attendees, to all of you who've made it to the very end. I know we've gone a little bit over time, so I think a few people may have had to dash off, but it's been lovely to see the sessions so well attended. All of the sessions have been recorded, so we will be uploading those to a conference YouTube channel, and I'll be sending a link out to all the people who've registered for the conference, and you'll get that linked, and you can feel free to share that as widely as you like. I'll just finish by thanking the conference committee and the session chairs. So that's Hamid Jamali, Anita Dewey, Elise Rosser, Holly Randall-Moon, Casey Garrison, Philip Hyder, and Jane Garner. They've all done lots of hard work over the last 6 months or so to pull this event together. Other than that, thank you again. Have a lovely Friday and weekend ahead. And maybe we'll see you next year for the 2026 edition. Bye-bye.